Captain Barkey survived the Jamaican military only to be gunned down in a cheap Bronx motel parking lot. The 90s dancehall icon spent decades commanding massive crowds, yet died completely helpless. For 5 years, he hid a secret New York romance from his wife, arrogantly ignoring warnings about his lover's violent ex-boyfriend. That fatal blind spot triggered a ruthless double execution, destroying a legendary career over a deadly love triangle. Wayne Hamilton began his life on November 5, 1961. Legal documents and official records later confirmed this exact timeline, correcting widespread errors in secondary sources that mistakenly pushed his birth year back a full decade to 1951, or incorrectly listed his given name as Jocelyn. For someone who would eventually command international attention, his early years remain almost entirely undocumented. Public files provide absolutely no insight into his parents, his family dynamics, or his primary schooling. He grew up in a total media blind spot, entering adulthood as a man without a publicly recorded past. His early identity was defined entirely by his immediate actions rather than a documented family legacy. Faced with the need for a reliable career path, Hamilton made a decisive choice to subject himself to ultimate structure. In 1983, he enlisted in the Jamaica Defense Force. He committed himself to active military duty, serving a grueling 6-year term that lasted until 1989. His famous stage title of captain was adopted much later strictly for theatrical purposes, never reflecting his actual military rank. He entered the armed forces as a standard recruit, starting from the bottom of a rigid, uncompromising hierarchy. The military environment did more than provide a paycheck. It systematically forged the physical and psychological tools he would later use to dominate the entertainment industry. The barracks stripped away any civilian lack of focus. He was subjected to intense physical conditioning, learning absolute body control, impeccable posture, and unshakable self-confidence. The Army demanded instant reactions and the ability to maintain composure under high-stress situations. Hamilton internalized these traits completely. Most critically, the military trained his voice. A soldier must know how to project commands across open terrain, ensuring every syllable is sharp, clear, and impossible to ignore. Hamilton learned how to speak from his chest, developing a booming, authoritative vocal delivery that demanded immediate attention. He mastered the mechanics of breath control and volume, treating his voice as an instrument of discipline. Despite the exhausting daily demands of active duty, his internal passion for music remained entirely intact. Hamilton lived a highly demanding double life throughout his 6 years of service. Whenever he earned a temporary leave pass, he did not use it to rest. He immediately headed toward the local street sound systems. He transitioned directly from the sterile, ordered environment of the military base into the chaotic, high-energy crowds of mobile street dances. He stood in the audience not just as a fan, but as an observant student. He watched how selectors and performing DJs controlled the restless crowds. Through the analytical lens of a soldier, he recognized a crucial similarity between his two worlds. Controlling an unpredictable audience required the exact same commanding projection and unwavering confidence that an officer used to control a platoon. Hamilton spent the late 1980s quietly preparing for a massive career shift. While still in uniform, he mentally dissected rhythm tracks, practiced spontaneous rhyming techniques, and studied the mechanics of stage control. He was a disciplined soldier, meticulously sharpening a completely different set of weapons. By the time his military service concluded in 1989, Wayne Hamilton was no longer just a discharged soldier. He was a fully trained performer, ready to carry the rigid discipline of the barracks directly into the heart of the music industry. Leaving the armed forces meant stepping into a void. Wayne Hamilton traded the guaranteed structure of the barracks for the brutal unpredictability of the Kingston streets. He officially entered the Jamaican sound system circuit in the late 1980s. This was not a polished corporate entertainment industry. It was a raw, fiercely competitive underground network. A sound system was a mobile fortress of towering speaker boxes, heavy amplifiers, and turntables. For a young artist trying to make a name, the sound system was the only university that mattered. There were no academic prerequisites, no safety nets, and no studio auditions. Survival depended entirely on vocal stamina and the ability to control a restless, highly critical audience in real time. The physical demands of this environment were staggering. Dances started late at night and ran well past sunrise. A DJ had to ride instrumental tracks, known as rhythms, for hours on end. If the crowd grew bored or felt the energy dip, their rejection was immediate and unforgiving. Hamilton brought his military-grade vocal projection directly into this arena. Operating under his newly minted stage name, Captain Barkey, he did not need to scream to be heard over the massive bass frequencies. He spoke from his chest. His delivery was clear, rhythmic, and fiercely commanding. He forced the audience to pay attention simply through the sheer weight of his voice. His early professional development was deeply tied to Stereo One. This particular sound system held immense influence during a crucial transitional period in Jamaican music. The late 1980s saw the organic live band sound of reggae giving way to the sharp, synthesized beats of digital dancehall. Stereo One stood at the absolute forefront of this digital revolution. Performing under their banner meant facing the highest possible expectations. Here, Barkey shared the microphone with established heavyweights like Lieutenant Stitchie. Stitchie was already famous for his breathless, rapid-fire lyrical delivery. Standing next to him, Barkey carved out a starkly contrasting style. He utilized strategic pauses, deliberate pacing, and a booming baritone that cut through the electronic bass lines like a knife. This unforgiving environment eventually introduced Barkey to the man who would become his lifelong creative anchor. David Taylor was another aspiring artist trying to navigate the complex world of dancehall, performing under the name Wickerman. Their initial meeting has become the stuff of industry legend, a story that perfectly encapsulates the chaotic reality of their lives. The encounter did not happen on a stage in Kingston. According to widespread accounts from industry peers, they crossed paths inside a cramped record store in Brooklyn, New York. The circumstances of their meeting could have easily ended in total disaster. As they struck up a conversation among the vinyl crates, the two men made a startling discovery. They realized they were both actively dating the exact same woman. In the highly masculine, fiercely proud culture of the late 1980s, this type of revelation typically resulted in immediate physical violence. Territorial disputes over romantic partners were common and often settled with fists or weapons. The tension in that Brooklyn store was palpable. Two ambitious, tough men from the streets of Jamaica stood face to face, realizing they had been completely played by the same person. What happened next defined the trajectory of both their lives. Instead of escalating the situation into a brawl, Barkey and Wickerman looked at the sheer absurdity of the scenario. They realized the woman had outsmarted them both. Rather than fighting each other to protect their fragile egos, they chose to laugh. They bonded instantly over the shared humiliation and the dark comedy of their predicament. This remarkable display of emotional intelligence transformed a volatile conflict into an unbreakable brotherhood. They walked out of that record store not as bitter rivals, but as a united front. This profound personal connection translated seamlessly to the stage. Barkey and Wickerman formed a dynamic duo that completely disrupted the standard performance templates of the era. The late 1980s and early 1990s were heavily dominated by aggressive lyrical content. Many DJs built their reputations on intimidating posturing, issuing verbal threats, and performing violent tracks. The dancehall stage was often treated as a battlefield where artists clashed to establish dominance and instill fear. Barkey and Wickerman rejected this template entirely. They recognized that the audiences, who faced extreme economic hardship and daily street-level stress, desperately needed a release valve. They needed entertainment, not just more aggression. The duo weaponized humor. They pioneered a highly interactive, conversational style of performance. When they took the microphone, they did not preach to the crowd or threaten unseen enemies. They talked directly to each other. They recreated the natural, rapid-fire banter of men hanging out on a Kingston street corner. Their sets felt less like formal musical performances and more like live comedic theater. Barkey, utilizing his authoritative voice, often played the straight man, issuing mock orders or making serious observations. Wickerman served as the chaotic counterweight, immediately undercutting Barkey's authority with sharp, witty retorts. They turned everyday struggles into premium entertainment. They joked about poverty, bad relationships, neighborhood gossip, and their own personal failures. They actively made fun of themselves, a highly rare trait in a genre built on massive egos. The audience saw their own lives reflected on stage, stripped of tragedy, and repackaged as comedy. If a technical glitch stopped the music, they did not panic. They turned the silence into a comedic routine, roasting the sound engineer or teasing people standing in the front row. They possessed an unparalleled ability to read the room, adjusting their tempo and their jokes based on the immediate shifting energy of the crowd. To survive the late 1980s circuit, Barkey also had to navigate the highly combative culture of the sound clash. A clash was a musical battle where rival sound systems competed directly against one another in the same venue. The goal was to win over the audience and theoretically silence the opposing sound system by playing better exclusive tracks or having superior live DJs. These events were fiercely tribal and deeply psychological. The crowd acted as the ultimate judge, signaling their approval with roaring cheers or their displeasure with deafening silence. Barkey approached these clashes with the tactical mindset of a veteran soldier. He understood that pure volume or unchecked aggression was not always the winning strategy. When rival DJs resorted to screaming insults, Barkey deployed calculated humiliation through humor. He would calmly wait for his turn, step to the center of the stage, and dismantle his opponent with a sharp comedic narrative that made the entire venue laugh at them. He used his deep, commanding voice to project absolute calm under pressure. By refusing to lose his composure, he naturally asserted dominance over his frantic rivals. This ability to diffuse tension and redirect the energy of a hostile crowd made him an incredibly valuable asset to any sound system he represented. Technically, Barkey was evolving rapidly during these years. The transition from analog bands to digital rhythms changed the fundamental rules of engagement for a DJ. Live bands could organically adjust their tempo to match a performer. A drum machine possessed no such empathy. It maintained a rigid, unforgiving pace. Barkey used his military-trained rhythmic precision to lock onto these digital beats flawlessly. He treated his voice as a percussive instrument. He learned to deliver punchlines exactly on the snare hit, leaving strategic gaps in his delivery to let the heavy electronic bass breathe. This technical mastery ensured that even when he was delivering a comedic routine, the fundamental momentum of the dancehall party never dropped. The bond with Wickerman provided a crucial safety net in a notoriously treacherous industry. The music business was filled with opportunistic promoters, unreliable producers, and backstabbing rivals. Having a trusted partner meant they could navigate these treacherous waters together. They shared earnings, protected each other from exploitative contracts, and provided mutual psychological support when shows went poorly. This solidarity was incredibly rare. Most sound system DJs operated as lone wolves, deeply paranoid about protecting their individual status. Barkey and Wickerman proved that collaboration could yield greater results than isolation. Their synergy became their strongest armor. Jamaica during this specific period was an intense, high-pressure environment. The structural adjustment programs of the previous decade had left deep economic scars on the working-class neighborhoods. Violence and political tension were undeniable facts of daily life. For the youth in the inner cities, the sound system was a vital sanctuary. It was the only place where the brutal realities of the outside world could be temporarily suspended. Barkey understood this fundamental psychological need. Having served in the military, he had seen the harsh realities of the state apparatus up close. He knew that the people standing in front of the speaker boxes did not need more stress. They needed pure catharsis. This understanding fueled his deliberate rejection of violence as a stage persona. While many of his peers found quick fame by mirroring the brutality of the streets in their lyrics, Barkey chose a much more difficult path. Making an exhausted, hardened crowd laugh requires significantly more skill than making them jump to a violent anthem. Humor requires impeccable timing, acute social awareness, and a deep well of empathy. Barkey and Wickerman had to be highly observant sociologists. They watched how men and women interacted in the dance, how people tried to maintain their dignity while enduring poverty, and how jealousy fractured friendships. They took these raw, authentic human experiences and spun them into lyrical gold. During this era, the dancehall audience was also evolving. The digital revolution democratized music production, leading to a massive explosion of new sounds and a faster turnover of popular rhythms. The crowd became vastly more demanding, possessing a shorter attention span and a relentless appetite for novelty. A DJ could not rely on the same routine for months. They had to constantly invent new melodies, new slang, and new ways to ride the beat. Barkey thrived in this intense pressure cooker. His improvisational skills, sharpened through endless back-and-forth banter with Wickerman, allowed him to generate entirely new material on the spot. He pulled inspiration from the immediate environment, referencing a specific outfit in the front row or a current local scandal, making every single performance feel utterly unique and immediate. The years between leaving the military and entering the commercial recording studios served as an intensive, unspoken curriculum. Barkey learned the absolute limits of his own endurance. He learned how to command respect without resorting to fear. He discovered that authenticity and relatability were far more sustainable career strategies than aggressive posturing. Every late-night session with Stereo One, every comedic duel with Wickerman, and every long journey between rural Jamaican parishes built the rock-solid foundation for the next phase of his life. By 1991, this partnership had solidified their reputations across the entire sound system network. They were no longer just two men trying to get a brief turn on the microphone. They were a highly anticipated main event. Promoters knew that booking Barkey and Wickerman guaranteed a packed venue and a fiercely engaged audience. They had successfully built a devoted grassroots following without relying on the commercial backing of major recording studios. They proved that charisma, timing, and raw comedic chemistry could rival the biggest, most aggressive names in the business. As 1991 approached, the lines between the street-level sound systems and the formal recording industry began to blur rapidly. Major producers started scouting the underground dances, looking for artists who already had a proven track record of controlling a massive crowd. Wayne Hamilton had spent years building an undeniable resume. He possessed the discipline of a soldier, the razor-sharp comedic timing of a veteran entertainer, and an unbreakable partnership with Wickerman. He had survived the harshest training ground the Jamaican music scene had to offer. The underground had taught him everything it could. The next step was taking that booming baritone voice and capturing it on wax, fully preparing to introduce Captain Barkey to a global audience. The year 1991 signaled a massive shift in Wayne Hamilton's career trajectory. He stepped out of the localized street sound systems and walked directly into the commercial recording industry. The dancehall genre itself was undergoing a radical technological transformation during this exact period. The era of large live bands packing into studios was rapidly fading. In their place came the digital revolution, driven by drum machines, synthesizers, and heavy electronic bass lines. Leading this unstoppable sonic shift were Steely and Clevie, a legendary production duo who essentially rewired the DNA of Jamaican music. They built tracks that were stripped down, aggressive, and highly rhythmic. This new production style demanded vocalists who could ride rigid, unforgiving digital beats with absolute precision. Human drummers could organically adjust their tempo to match a singer. A drum machine offered no such flexibility. Captain Barkey, with his military-trained rhythmic discipline, was the perfect weapon for this new era. Working in a formal recording booth is vastly different from chanting on a street corner. In a sound system dance, a DJ relies on the visual energy of the crowd. In the studio, there is only the microphone, the soundproof walls, and the raw beat. Barkey adapted immediately. He utilized his deep baritone voice to punch through the heavy digital bass. His early commercial recordings established a dominant, no-nonsense persona. He released early digital tracks like Gun and Original Get and No Chat. Listeners unfamiliar with dancehall culture often misinterpret the lyrical content of this specific era. The track Gun featured aggressive lyrics that sounded like a legitimate physical threat. However, within the context of the Jamaican music industry, this was purely theatrical exaggeration. Barkey was not a street gangster confessing to actual crimes. He was a professional entertainer playing a role. He used aggressive imagery the same way an action movie director uses special effects, simply to build tension, capture attention, and establish vocal dominance over rival artists. His military background gave his delivery a terrifying authenticity, but it was strictly an on-stage persona designed to win over a tough crowd. As he grew more comfortable in the studio between 1992 and 1994, Barkey pivoted away from aggressive posturing. He realized his true strength lay in his observational humor and his ability to tell highly relatable stories. He began targeting the complex, often chaotic realities of domestic life and romantic relationships. He tapped into a deeply rooted cultural concept known in Jamaica as bun. This slang term refers to infidelity, specifically the humiliation, anger, and chaos of being cheated on. In many societies, infidelity is treated as a deeply private tragedy. Barkey dragged it into the public square and turned it into high-volume comedy. He transformed bitter experiences of betrayal into hilarious, fast-paced narratives. He released a rapid succession of narrative-driven tracks, including Gal at Me Door, Some Gal a Idiot, Text Somebody, and Slow Type of Death. Barkey did not sing with a smooth, melodic voice. He was a rhythm writer and a master storyteller. He acted out multiple characters within a single song. He mimicked the voices of angry boyfriends, caught-in-the-act lovers, and gossiping neighbors. He painted vivid pictures of men getting locked out of their houses, women discovering secret lovers, and the absurd excuses people make when caught in a lie. The public response was immediate and overwhelming. The working-class audiences saw their own messy, flawed lives reflected back at them, completely stripped of shame and repackaged as premium entertainment. Barkey possessed a unique psychological ability to make the victim of a bad relationship laugh at their own misfortune. He removed the sting from domestic drama and replaced it with a heavy bass line. In 1995, Barkey attempted to showcase a different side of his artistry. He recorded a track titled Antichrist. This song was a stark departure from his usual comedic material. It delivered sharp social and religious commentary, criticizing the hypocrisy he observed within institutionalized religion and society at large. The track demonstrated that his songwriting capabilities extended far beyond jokes and party anthems. He was highly observant and deeply critical of systemic corruption. However, the commercial market had already made its decision. While Antichrist earned respect from industry purists, The massive crowd simply wanted the funny, highly energetic Captain Barkey back. They wanted a temporary escape from their daily struggles, not a heavy reminder of them. Barkey accepted this reality and leaned heavily into his strengths. This pragmatic decision paved the way for 1996, the absolute commercial zenith of his musical career. He stopped trying to lecture the audience and focused entirely on making them move. He released the monumental hit Go Go Wine. The massive cultural impact of this song hinged on a specific local term. In dancehall culture, the word wine has absolutely zero connection to alcohol. It refers to a specific rhythmic, hip-rolling dance movement. Go Go Wine was not just a song, it was a direct physical command. Barkey utilized the authoritative vocal projection he learned in the Jamaica Defense Force to orchestrate massive crowds. When the heavy bass line dropped, Barkey barked out choreographic instructions. He told the audience exactly when to drop, when to spin, and when to freeze. The crowds obeyed instantly. He treated the dance floor like a military parade ground, but instead of demanding rigid discipline, he demanded total physical release. The song became an inescapable anthem across the Caribbean and the international diaspora. It dominated radio stations, street dances, and commercial clubs. He quickly followed up this massive success with Go Go Macarena. During this exact time, the Spanish dance track Macarena was a global pop culture phenomenon. Barkey demonstrated immense commercial awareness by immediately localizing this global trend. He stripped away the polished pop aesthetic of the original and injected it with raw Kingston energy. He gave the Jamaican audience their own authentic, bass-heavy version of a worldwide craze. He continued his dominant streak with the hit 8,000, 888,000, further cementing his status as an unstoppable hitmaker. By the end of 1996, Captain Barkey was no longer just a respected sound system veteran. He was a bona fide commercial superstar. He was booked for major international festivals, traveling across the globe to perform for thousands of screaming fans. He had successfully translated the chaotic energy of a local street dance into a highly lucrative, universally understood commercial product. He had reached the top of the mountain. He possessed fame, financial stability, and the adoration of millions. Yet, as the calendar turned toward the new millennium, the music industry prepared for another massive shift. And while his professional life was perfectly orchestrated, his private life was quietly spiraling into an incredibly dangerous entanglement that no amount of stage command could control. The dawn of the new millennium completely rewrote the rules of the music industry. The physical record business, built on vinyl and cassettes, began to collapse. Cheap, accessible recording software like Pro Tools flooded the market. Suddenly, anyone with a computer could build a studio in their bedroom. In Jamaica, this technological shift triggered an absolute avalanche of new music. The rhythm of the industry accelerated to a frantic pace. In the mid-90s, a hit song like Go Go Wine could dominate the radio for an entire year. By the early 2000s, the lifespan of a dancehall hit shrank from months to mere weeks. A massive wave of younger, hyper-energetic artists stormed the gates. They brought new slang, new attitudes, and a faster tempo that perfectly matched the digital era. For a veteran like Wayne Hamilton, the writing was on the wall. The era of scoring continuous global radio hits was over. He was no longer the fresh, unpredictable voice dominating the charts. He had become a legacy artist. Many performers from his generation failed to accept this reality. They chased trends, attempted to mimic the younger artists, and ultimately ruined their own legacies. Barkey did not make this mistake. He possessed a sharp, pragmatic understanding of the business. He knew his chart-topping days were behind him, but he also knew something else. Younger artists might have the radio hits, but very few of them knew how to control a live stage for 2 straight hours. Barkey leveraged his greatest asset. He transitioned from a recording star into a relentless touring machine. He shifted his focus away from the Kingston recording studios and aimed directly at the international Jamaican diaspora. There was a massive, loyal audience living in New York, Miami, Toronto, and London. These working-class immigrants wanted a taste of home. They did not just want to hear the new songs. They wanted the classic anthems that reminded them of the Jamaica they left behind. Barkey became a staple in the overseas club circuit. This was a grueling, unglamorous lifestyle. It meant endless weekend flights, sleeping in cheap hotels, and performing in packed, heavily air-conditioned basements in foreign cities. He traded the massive festival stages for intimate, high-intensity club venues, but he never gave less than maximum effort. Whether performing for 5,000 people or 500, he brought the exact same commanding presence, the same flawless comedic timing, and the same thunderous voice. He became a reliable, hard-working professional, grinding out a living on the road. Behind this exhausting travel schedule, Barkey's personal life was a complex, highly compartmentalized web. When he was not touring, he did not live in the tropical heat of Jamaica or the bustling neighborhoods of New York. He lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Milwaukee is a quiet, industrial city in the American Midwest, famous for its freezing winters and blue-collar work ethic. For a dancehall superstar, it was an incredibly unexpected place to call home. But for Barkey, the city served a very specific purpose. It was a fortress. It was a place entirely disconnected from the noise, the groupies, and the intense pressure of the music industry. It was a place where Wayne Hamilton could simply exist without being Captain Barkey. The center of this Midwestern fortress was his legal wife, Mavis Hamilton. Mavis was not a loud, flashy industry wife seeking the spotlight. She was grounded, pragmatic, and fiercely resilient. Being married to a touring dancehall artist requires a near superhuman level of tolerance, and Mavis bore this weight with quiet dignity. The reality of their marriage was complicated. The dancehall lifestyle is notoriously hyper-masculine, and infidelity is often normalized, sometimes even celebrated, within the culture. Throughout his life, Barkey fathered 8 children with several different women. Managing the emotional and financial fallout of such a sprawling, fractured family structure would have broken most marriages. Yet, Mavis stayed. She did not stay out of weakness. She stayed out of a profound, pragmatic commitment to her family. She created a stable, reliable home base. She understood the clear division between Wayne Hamilton, the husband, and Captain Barkey, the entertainer. She accepted the flaws of the man in order to preserve the foundation of their home. In a chaotic world built on late-night shows and fleeting fame, Mavis was his anchor. She maintained the house, raised the family, and provided a safe harbor for him to return to after weeks on the road. Barkey managed this duality well for years. He kept his professional life on the East Coast and his domestic life in the Midwest completely separate. But in 2007, the neat divisions of his life began to unravel. The catalyst was a standard booking. Barkey traveled back to Jamaica to perform at an event in St. Elizabeth. Known as the breadbasket of Jamaica, St. Elizabeth is a rural parish famous for its farming communities and intense, vibrant local dances. Barkey was back in his element, commanding the crowd, cracking jokes, and dominating the stage. It was at this specific event that he crossed paths with Tracy Bennett. Tracy was not a local groupie looking for a quick thrill. She was an educated, highly successful professional. Born in Jamaica, she had migrated to the United States and built a formidable career. She was a registered nurse, working in high-pressure medical environments in New York. She owned a beautiful home in Elmont, a comfortable suburb on Long Island. Tracy was fiercely independent, financially secure, and accustomed to managing her own life. The attraction between them was immediate and intense. They were two highly driven people operating in completely different worlds. To Barkey, Tracy represented the polish and success of the New York diaspora. She was smart, successful, and entirely self-sufficient. To Tracy, Barkey offered a direct connection to the vibrant Jamaican culture she missed, wrapped in the undeniable charisma of a famous entertainer. What started as a fleeting encounter in St. Elizabeth quickly escalated into a deep, consuming relationship once they both returned to the United States. Barkey made a dangerous decision. Instead of treating the encounter as a brief tour romance, he integrated Tracy into his routine. He began living a highly risky double life. He still maintained his primary residence and marriage with Mavis in Milwaukee. But whenever he traveled to New York for shows, which was frequent, he spent his time with Tracy. For 5 years, he successfully hid the affair from his wife. He became a master of logistics and deception. He managed different cell phones, coordinated flight schedules, and compartmentalized his emotions perfectly. When he was in Wisconsin, he was the settled family man. When he flew into John F. Kennedy Airport, he stepped into his alternate reality. Tracy's home in Elmont became his New York sanctuary. The relationship was not just physical, it was deeply emotional. They built a genuine partnership in the shadows. For a time, it seemed like Barkey had successfully engineered the perfect arrangement. He had the quiet stability of his marriage in the Midwest and the passionate, exciting affair on the East Coast. But hiding a secret of this magnitude requires absolute control over your environment. Barkey thought he was in command of the situation. He believed his careful planning and discreet travel schedules would keep the two worlds from colliding. What he failed to realize was that Tracy's life contained a massive, deeply unstable variable of its own. While Barkey was busy hiding the affair from his wife, he was entirely oblivious to the fact that someone else in New York was watching Tracy's every move. He had unknowingly stepped into a pre-existing domestic war zone. The woman he was secretly loving was desperately trying to escape a violently possessive ex-partner. Barkey thought he was managing a quiet, harmless romance. In reality, he had just walked blindfolded into a fatal trap. Tracy Bennett had worked tirelessly to build a life of complete independence and respectability. As a registered nurse at Winthrop Hospital in Long Island, she navigated the high-stress, demanding environment of the medical field with absolute professionalism. She was a woman who saved lives, managed crises, and commanded respect from her peers. Through years of hard work, she achieved a significant milestone of the American dream. She purchased a beautiful, spacious home in the quiet, tree-lined suburb of Elmont, New York. To the outside observer, Tracy was the picture of immigrant success. She had financial stability, a respected career, and a comfortable sanctuary away from the noise of the city. But behind the manicured lawn and the solid brick walls of her Elmont home, Tracy was fighting a terrifying private war. Her success had tethered her to a deeply toxic and volatile man named Joseph Kernizan. Kernizan was a man of Haitian descent who operated far outside the boundaries of a normal, lawful life. Unlike Tracy, who built her life on education and public service, Kernizan had a well-documented history of legal troubles. He possessed a reckless, highly aggressive disposition. He did not view relationships as partnerships. He viewed them as ownership. He demanded total control over the people in his life, and his reactions to any form of defiance were often swift and intimidating. Tracy recognized the severe danger Kernizan posed. She was not a passive victim. Using her natural intelligence and resolve, she took decisive steps to cut him out of her life. She ended the romantic relationship and went directly to the justice system for help. She navigated the family courts, detailed his aggressive behavior, and successfully secured a legal restraining order against him. She did everything society and law enforcement advise a person to do when escaping an abusive partner. The tragedy of Tracy's situation lay in the cold, unyielding nature of property law and family courts. A restraining order is ultimately just a piece of paper. It cannot erase legally binding contracts. Tracy and Kernizan still co-owned the house in Elmont. Their names were permanently linked on the deed. Furthermore, they shared 2 children together. This meant the family court system legally mandated visitation rights for Kernizan. This legal framework created an inescapable psychological torture chamber for Tracy. She had locked the front door, but the legal system kept handing Kernizan the keys. He exploited these loopholes mercilessly. He used his mandated visitation rights not simply to see his children, but to monitor Tracy. He weaponized his status as a co-owner of the property, hovering around the edges of her life, making sure she knew he was always watching. He maintained a constant, suffocating grip on her reality. Her beautiful suburban home was no longer a sanctuary. It was a gilded cage where her abuser had legal permission to patrol the perimeter. This was the highly combustible environment into which Wayne Hamilton unknowingly stepped. When Kernizan inevitably discovered that Tracy was seeing someone new, his reaction went far beyond normal jealousy. To a man driven by extreme possessiveness, Barkey was not just a romantic rival. He was an absolute insult to Kernizan's ego. The fact that Tracy had moved on with a famous, highly confident, international entertainer enraged Kernizan on a primal level. Kernizan did not keep his anger hidden. He escalated the situation from psychological intimidation to direct physical violence. The threats moved off the phone and into the streets of New York. In one terrifying incident, Kernizan stalked the couple as they drove through the city. Waiting for the right moment, he accelerated his vehicle and intentionally rammed it directly into the side of the car Barkey and Tracy were traveling in. This was not a traffic accident. It was a calculated, violent ambush. It was Kernizan sending a crystal-clear message. He was willing to use lethal force. He did not care about the consequences, and nowhere in the city was safe. The sheer madness of this daytime attack deeply rattled the people in Barkey's inner circle. Word of the incident quickly reached Wickerman. Having stood shoulder to shoulder with Barkey for decades, Wickerman knew his partner better than anyone else in the world. He possessed an objective, clear-eyed view of the situation that Barkey, blinded by romance, lacked. Wickerman saw exactly what Kernizan was. He recognized the desperate, unhinged energy of a man who felt he had nothing to lose. He knew that men like Kernizan did not care about Barkey's fame, his music catalog, or his tough guy stage persona. The rules of a dancehall clash did not apply to a domestic abuser with a criminal mindset. Wickerman intervened aggressively. He sat Barkey down and delivered a blunt, uncompromising warning. He told his lifelong friend that he was playing a deadly game. He urged Barkey to cut his losses, pack his bags, and immediately end the relationship with Tracy. He pleaded with him to go back to his wife in Milwaukee, to focus on his tours, and to walk away before someone ended up in a body bag. But Barkey did not listen. This decision highlights the tragic flaw in Barkey's character. His greatest strengths on stage, his supreme self-confidence, his fearlessness, and his absolute belief that he could control any situation became his ultimate blind spots in real life. Barkey had survived the brutal streets of Kingston. He had endured the grueling, rigid discipline of the Jamaica Defense Force. He had faced down thousands of hostile, screaming fans in sound system clashes and always walked away the victor. He had spent his entire adult life successfully commanding people to do exactly what he wanted. Because of this deeply ingrained confidence, Barkey drastically underestimated the threat. He likely viewed Kernizan as just another loud, aggressive man trying to intimidate him. Barkey was a former soldier. He simply did not know how to back down from a fight. He refused to let another man dictate where he could go or who he could see. He brushed off Wickerman's desperate warnings, confident that his own street smarts and physical presence would be enough to keep Kernizan at bay. Instead of de-escalating the conflict, Barkey inadvertently poured gasoline directly onto the fire. In 2010, right in the middle of this intense high-stakes standoff, Barkey released a new track. The song was titled "Nah Left Joe." In the Jamaican dialect, the title roughly translates to "Not Leaving Joe." The lyrics of the song dove right back into Barkey's signature subject matter, the humiliation and chaos of infidelity. The track narrated a story about a man discovering his partner is cheating, yet the woman refuses to leave her original man, resulting in a messy, humiliating triangle. In the insular, highly observant world of dancehall music, nothing happens in a vacuum. Artists frequently used their music to send coded messages, settle personal scores, or taunt their rivals. When Nah Left Joe hit the streets, the reaction was immediate. To the general public, it was just another catchy, comedic Barkey track. But to the people in New York who knew about the tension between Barkey, Tracy, and Kernizan, the song sounded like a highly specific, publicly broadcast insult. Kernizan's first name was Joseph. He went by Joe. Whether Barkey intentionally wrote the song to mock Kernizan, or whether it was simply a disastrous coincidence born from his usual subject matter, the intent no longer mattered. In the streets, perception is reality. The song was widely interpreted as Barkey publicly humiliating Kernizan, rubbing the affair in his face and broadcasting to the world that Kernizan's former partner had chosen a dancehall star over him. For a man like Kernizan, whose entire identity was built on control and intimidation, this public humiliation was the ultimate trigger. It was the absolute point of no return. Barkey thought he was just doing his job, entertaining the masses and perhaps winning a war of words. But he did not realize that Kernizan had stopped listening to the words. Kernizan had already moved past intimidation. He was no longer trying to scare Barkey away. He was actively planning to eliminate him entirely. The battle lines were now drawn in concrete. The legal system had failed to protect Tracy. The warnings of loyal friends had been completely ignored. The arrogance of fame had blinded a veteran performer to the cold, hard reality of a desperate man's rage. Barkey and Tracy continued their routine, believing they could somehow navigate around the danger. They did not know that their time was rapidly running out and that Kernizan was simply waiting in the shadows for the perfect opportunity to strike. Friday evening brought a crisp chill to the air on October 12, 2012. Wayne Hamilton boarded a flight out of Milwaukee, leaving the quiet, predictable safety of his Midwestern life behind. He was heading back to the East Coast, diving straight into the vibrant, high-energy world of the Jamaican diaspora in New York. According to the friends who spoke to him that day, his mood was exceptionally light. He was not a man weighed down by fear or anxiety. He carried himself with the usual supreme confidence that had defined his entire adult life. He believed he was entirely in control of his destiny, completely unaware that he was stepping directly into his final hours. Landing at LaGuardia Airport, he stepped into the familiar rhythm of the city. Before meeting Tracy, he spent time doing what he loved most, connecting with his musical brotherhood. He picked up his phone and dialed his longtime colleague and close friend, Lloyd D. Stiff. What followed was not a brief check-in. The two veterans stayed on the phone for well over an hour. They did not discuss business, booking fees, or industry drama. Instead, they took a long look backward. They reminisced about their youth in Jamaica, the grueling early days of the sound system circuit, and the impossible odds they had overcome to build successful international careers. Looking back, this long conversation feels profoundly poignant. It was an unintentional exit interview. Hamilton spent his final evening reflecting on the immense journey of his life, laughing with a man who had known him before the fame, the money, and the complications. He ended the call in high spirits, completely oblivious to the fact that it was the last time his friend would ever hear his commanding baritone voice. Later that night, the focus shifted to the Bronx. He traveled to a popular local venue named Memories Nightclub. The name of the club itself now carries a heavy, tragic irony. It was a standard night out in the dancehall scene. The music was loud, the bass was heavy, and Barkey was completely in his element. He met Tracy Bennett there. For a few hours, they were just another happy couple, enjoying the music and the atmosphere, completely insulated from the severe danger closing in on them. They were surrounded by people, noise, and light. As the night stretched into the early hours of Saturday morning, the couple decided it was time to leave the club and find a quiet place to rest. Tracy took the wheel of her Toyota Camry. They needed a place to stay. Driving back to Tracy's house in Elmont was likely out of the question. Her home, co-owned by Joseph Kernizan, was effectively enemy territory. It was the place where her abuser had legal access and where he frequently prowled. Seeking a neutral, safe location away from the complicated realities of their daily lives, they made a seemingly mundane decision. They pulled into the Holiday Motel, a budget-friendly, unassuming establishment in the Bronx. The motel was running a promotional deal, making it a convenient, low-profile stop for the night. This simple choice created a catastrophic security vulnerability. A budget motel does not have gated security, valet parking, or restricted access. It features an open parking lot facing the street, designed for quick arrivals and departures. Anyone could drive in, and anyone could wait in the shadows. Barkey and Tracy believed they had slipped away unnoticed. They thought the darkness offered them a cloak of privacy. They were tragically mistaken. Every single move they made that night had been meticulously tracked. The exact method Kernizan used to track them remains a chilling unknown. Whether he used digital tracking devices placed on Tracy's vehicle, followed them from the airport, or stalked the nightclub from a distance, his persistence was absolute. He possessed the terrifying patience of a predator. While Barkey and Tracy slept, Kernizan waited outside in the cold autumn night. He did not rush. He did not cause a scene in the lobby. He sat in the dark, watching their parked Toyota Camry, clutching a loaded weapon, and letting his rage reach a boiling point. At approximately 10 minutes past 3 in the morning on October 13, the door to their motel room opened. Barkey and Tracy stepped out into the quiet, dimly lit parking lot. The air was still. There was no warning, no shouting, and no chance to negotiate. As they walked toward the car to start the engine, the shadows moved. Joseph Kernizan launched his ambush with devastating speed. Confronted suddenly by a man with a firearm, every single skill Wayne Hamilton had spent his life developing became entirely useless. His military discipline, his commanding voice, and his fearless stage presence could not stop the mechanical reality of a weapon. The confident, unbreakable Captain Barkey was suddenly reduced to a desperate man fighting for his life. Realizing the lethal intent of the attacker, Hamilton tried to act. He scrambled frantically to open the door of the Toyota Camry, seeking cover. When that failed, his survival instincts kicked in. He turned his back on Kernizan and ran. He sprinted desperately across the concrete toward the motel's front office, hoping to find a locked door, a security guard, or any form of human intervention. He never made it. Kernizan raised his weapon and fired. The attacker struck Hamilton from behind, landing multiple devastating hits. The dancehall legend collapsed onto the pavement of the motel parking lot. The booming voice that had controlled massive festival crowds across the globe was silenced instantly. With Hamilton eliminated, the nightmare shifted entirely to Tracy Bennett. She was trapped beside her car, the engine now running, providing a grim soundtrack to her final moments. She dropped to the ground, collapsing near the tires. The woman who had fought so hard to build an independent life, who had trusted the legal system and filed the restraining orders, was now completely at the mercy of the monster she had tried to escape. She screamed in absolute terror. She pleaded for her life. She begged the man she had once built a family with to show some fraction of humanity. Kernizan showed none. He stood over the mother of his children, entirely consumed by vengeance and possessive rage. Ignoring her desperate, agonizing pleas, he leveled his weapon one final time and ended her life. The ambush was over in a matter of seconds. The sudden, explosive violence shattered the quiet Bronx night, leaving behind an unimaginable tragedy. 2 vibrant lives were violently erased. Kernizan turned away from the destruction he had caused, slipped back into the darkness, and fled the scene. The motel parking lot fell silent again, save for the hum of the running car, marking the brutal and definitive end of an era. Immediately following the gunfire, the Bronx motel parking lot became an active crime scene. The New York Police Department arrived rapidly, locking down the perimeter and securing the area. First responders found a devastating reality. Wayne Hamilton and Tracy Bennett were beyond medical help and were pronounced dead at the scene. Detectives immediately pulled the surveillance footage from the motel cameras. The grainy video provided undeniable, horrifying proof of the ambush. Joseph Kernizon was officially identified as the prime suspect. An intensive multi-agency manhunt launched before sunrise. Alerts flashed across law enforcement databases along the entire East Coast. The NYPD classified Kernizon as armed, highly dangerous, and completely unstable. Kernizon did not stay in New York. Knowing the city borders would soon close around him, he fled south. He navigated the interstate highway system, slipping out of the immediate jurisdiction of local detectives. His flight path took him down the eastern seaboard, finally stopping in the state of Florida. Local police could not handle a fugitive of this threat level alone. The United States Marshals Service joined the pursuit. The Marshals specialize in tracking violent fugitives across state boundaries. They did not search blindly. They executed a tactical clampdown on Kernizon's known associates, analyzed phone records, and monitored digital footprints. They systematically isolated him. It took the federal agents just 3 days to close the net. On the evening of October 16, 2012, law enforcement located his hideout. He was cornered inside an apartment complex in Miami-Dade County. Tactical SWAT teams established a heavily armed perimeter. They sealed every exit and secured the surrounding units. Kernizon looked out and realized his run was officially over. There would be no escape route and no dramatic shootout. The concrete apartment had become a trap. Faced with the absolute certainty of spending the rest of his life inside a federal penitentiary, the abuser chose a coward's exit. Before the tactical team could breach the front door, Kernizon turned his weapon on himself. He committed suicide right there in the apartment. His sudden death abruptly terminated the legal process. The justice system lost the ability to put him on trial. Crucial questions evaporated with him. Detectives could never interrogate him to find out exactly how he tracked Tracy that night, or if anyone in his network helped him finance his escape to Florida. The families of the victims were forever denied the closure of a courtroom verdict. Kernizon escaped human justice, leaving behind a permanently fractured reality for 2 families. News of the Bronx ambush hit the Jamaican music industry with the force of an earthquake. The shock waves traveled instantly from New York to Kingston and across the global diaspora. Fans simply refused to believe the initial reports. Wayne Hamilton was a figure of immense vitality, humor, and physical strength. The idea that he was gunned down in a budget motel parking lot felt completely surreal. Grief materialized immediately in the streets. In the Queens borough of New York, the absolute heart of the local Jamaican community, fans did not wait for official memorial services. Hundreds of people gathered outdoors in the pouring rain. They set up massive sound system speakers right on the sidewalks. Police cruisers blocked off the streets but did not intervene, allowing the community to mourn in their own way. Selectors blasted his biggest hits, turning a tragic loss into a high-volume celebration of his life. Fellow artists arrived to pay their respects. They chanted over instrumentals and remembered the man who had commanded their stages for over 2 decades. After the forensic investigations concluded in New York, Hamilton's body was repatriated. He was flown back to his homeland of Jamaica for his final rites. The funeral took place in the Hagley Park area of St. Andrew, hosted at a massive Seventh-day Adventist church. The event brought the entire dancehall industry to a standstill. Major recording artists, legendary producers, and veteran sound system selectors filled the pews. They sat alongside his immediate family, his brother Otis Ellis and his daughter Sashano. Because of his 6 years of active duty in the Jamaica Defense Force, the Jamaican government granted him an extraordinary honor. Wayne Hamilton received a formal military burial. Following the church service, his casket was transported to Up Park Camp, the primary headquarters of the Jamaican military. He was laid to rest with the disciplined respect reserved for soldiers. a fitting tribute to the rigorous environment that first built his commanding persona. Despite the heavy industry presence and the military honors, the defining moment of the funeral came from a civilian. It came from Mavis Hamilton. Mavis faced an unimaginably cruel situation. Her husband's murder had brutally exposed his secret 5-year affair to the entire world. The media heavily scrutinized her marriage. The public whispered endlessly about the scandal. Many expected her to hide from the cameras, skip the public ceremonies, or express bitter resentment. She chose a completely different path. Mavis walked directly up to the glass-topped casket. She stood tall, refusing to bow her head in shame. She turned to face the massive crowd of celebrities, soldiers, and reporters. Without a microphone, she delivered a statement of absolute emotional dominance. She declared to the crowd that Wayne Hamilton was the singular love of her life. She acknowledged his flaws without hesitation, stating that regardless of his actions in New York, he still belonged to her. She reminded the audience of the vows she took, emphasizing that she married him for better or worse. She looked directly at the crowd and announced that she wore the title of his wife with immense pride and total dignity. Her stoic, unshakable presence instantly neutralized the scandal. Mavis demonstrated a level of loyalty and strength that silenced every critic in the room. She protected his legacy when he could no longer protect himself. She proved that while Captain Barkey commanded the stage, Mavis Hamilton commanded the reality of their family. The legacy of Wayne Hamilton requires no exaggeration. He proved that a DJ did not need to rely on violent threats to capture an audience. He used razor-sharp humor, flawless timing, and military-grade vocal projection to turn local street dances into global phenomenons. He left behind a catalog of anthems that still dictate the rhythm of Caribbean parties today. His tragic end serves as a brutal reality check. It highlights the fatal consequences of underestimating domestic violence and the lethal reality of possessive rage. However, the tragedy does not erase the music. Long after the shock of his death fades, the booming baritone of Captain Barkey remains. He was a soldier who found his true calling on the stage, a flawed man deeply loved by his family, and a master entertainer who forced the world to listen.